Choosing one's always difficult. I think policies flow from your principles rather than the other way around. And what is the basic principle of the Conservative Party? It is that we believe that society is built from the bottom up by individuals and their families, not from the top down. And you need to structure a society that flows from that. And so what am I talking about? I'm talking about maximizing choice of individuals against the state. So a smaller state that does things better. So that means returning power to Parliament, the representative of the people, rather than leaving it with bureaucracies and with quangos and with international bodies. So I would like to see as the first act of Parliament a constitutional restoration to put us back to the position we were in before Tony Blair vandalised the Constitution. Once you've done that, you can then begin to legislate on all the things that you want to do without finding that you're stymied by quangos, courts, regulators, international bodies, and so on. So it would be a big constitutional restoration. However, that's not necessarily the most exciting thing to put in a manifesto. So I think what you've got to be emphasizing in the manifesto is that you're giving power back to people and taking it away from failed institutions.
What was one policy in the last government you were disappointed with?
Well, the fact that we raised taxes and we allowed spending to get too high. So I think that was clearly unconservative, that we increased taxation. We had a proposal, it was then reversed, fortunately, to increase national insurance. We froze the thresholds. We made it worse for people who had conservative values, and we gave more money to the welfare state, which I think was a mistake.
It's obviously 10 years since Brexit. Do you see us ever possibly re-entering the European Union?
I think it's very unlikely. I'd be very surprised if people voted to rejoin. Bear in mind that if we did rejoin, we would then have to make a very substantial financial contribution. People estimate £28 billion a year, but likely to go up with the new budget that the EU is proposing currently, the Commission is proposing potentially to £36 billion a year. We'd have a legal obligation to enter the euro, which we had not out from, and we'd have to go back to free movement of people. When you ask voters, do they want to surrender power to international bodies, whether it's the European Union or anyone else, they resoundingly say no. So I think it's very unlikely we'll go back. And I think it'd be very bad for us. I'd be surprised if in a generation there was a European Union to go back into. I think there would be absolute outrage if a majority of 17.4 million, or a vote of 17.4 million, was overturned by a party that got elected on about 9 million votes. I just don't think that's a realistic prospect. If they cozy up to Europe and they have dynamic alignment and all these sorts of things, well, a Conservative government can just reverse that. It's much easier to reverse silly agreements with the EU than it is to reverse membership.
I'm not sure if you're aware, but there is a TikTok account, obviously on TikTok, that gets millions of likes, and it's Rees-Mogg for 2029. Would you ever consider standing for leadership?
No, there isn't a vacancy. I'm a great supporter of Kemi Badenoch. I think she's terrific and is going from strength to strength, and we're really seeing her virtues. I was unaware of this TikTok account, so thank you for telling me about it. I'd better consult my daughter, who knows more about TikTok than I do.
Who was your favourite colleague in the last government?
Oh, that's a very difficult question because one likes so many different people for different reasons. But I have the greatest admiration and respect and liking for Bill Cash, who I think was so important to the whole Brexit debate.
You were obviously leader of the House of Commons. What is that role like on a day-to-day?
I loved it because I enjoy parliamentary procedure. I find it fascinating and the details and intricacies of it. There was a great deal of procedure that you had to deal with, and I had a wonderful clerk who advised me on that. There was also the management of the House of Commons and the responsiveness to backbenchers on behalf of the government. So I enjoyed the whole role. It was a very interesting role and widespread role, but the key was to make sure that the government got its business through the House of Commons and help the Chief Whip.
What's your favourite part of parliamentary procedure?
Oh, my favourite part of parliamentary procedure, my favourite discussion on parliamentary procedure was one I had with this brilliant clerk I was talking about, who was on secondment to the Cabinet Office. And it was a question as to whether or not a humble address fell at prorogation or whether it survived prorogation. And I argued that it fell at prorogation, and she said, no, it didn't. And I went away and found the first edition of Erskine May, which said it fell at prorogation. So I was feeling very smug and thought, good, I'm right. She found the 12th edition of Erskine May, which said it didn't fall at prorogation. And because humble addresses had fallen out of fashion, from then on, nothing was said about them. So you had about 100 years of no entries on humble addresses in Erskine May. So we both managed to find, excuse me, we both managed to find a source that backed up our own view.
What do you think is the biggest thing setting back the UK for growth?
Oh, our dreadful energy policy. Expensive energy is catastrophic. We need to scrap the Climate Change Act, scrap the net zero targets, maximise the North Sea and start fracking. I think voters want cheap energy. I think, say to voters, we'll lower the price of electricity. They'd be delighted, and gas bills. Well, I think the Conservatives and Reform take very similar views on many things, so I'm in favour of cooperating with Reform.
How so?
Well, I mean, there are areas of the country where Reform is much stronger than we are. Look at what happened in Makerfield and Aberdeen South. In Makerfield, we had a candidate, but we didn't do anything. In Aberdeen South, I didn't notice much happening from Reform. That seems quite a sensible allocation of resources. We fight where we're likely to win, and we let them fight where they're likely to win.
So do you think there was an unofficial agreement, or?
No, I don't think there was at all. I don't think there needed to be. I also think voters are more sophisticated than we give them credit for. I think most Conservatives in Makerfield voted Reform tactically. They did tactical voting without being told to do so. They didn't need to be told to do so.
Will you be standing again in 2029?
That's a very good question. I mean, we'll have to wait and see if anybody would want to select me. Like anybody else, I'm dependent on being selected by local associations. So if a local association were to select me, I'd be delighted to get back in the House of Commons. Well, Catholic social teaching in the history of the Church is a fairly modern innovation. It starts with Rerum Novarum under Pope Leo XIII. And it is information that one needs to take seriously, but it is not infallible. So the papal teaching on the Assumption, for example, is an infallible statement of faith, and all Catholics must believe that. Rerum Novarum and subsequent encyclicals on social policy are not, and it's much harder for the papacy to deal with social policy because, of course, things change in a way that eternal truths do not change. The papacy has been here before. In the early 14th century, Pope Boniface VIII issued a papal bull, Unum Sanctum, saying that all secular power was subservient to the papacy. And this is a position the Church withdrew from because it recognized that secular power and spiritual power are separate. And I think that separation is crucially important.
Do you think the Pope is woke?
Yeah. No, I think the Holy Father is the Holy Father, and he is the keeper of the sacred trust directly from Christ via St. Peter. I think secular power is with the secular authority, and the Church has recognized that for centuries. Spiritual power is rightly reserved to Rome, and the Holy Father is entitled to give spiritual guidance to his flock. That's his job, and his flock are well advised to follow his spiritual guidance. He has great authority to do that. He has direct apostolic authority to do that. I read the AI encyclical of the Holy Father very carefully, and it's, to my mind, in terms of the spiritual side, absolutely right and essential that mankind keeps control of AI. When it started saying governments should regulate it, I was more concerned because the governments that regulate the internet are governments like China and North Korea and Russia, and the ones that are relatively deregulatory are the United Kingdom, the United States, and so on. And I don't want us to be numbered amongst the autocracies.
So do you think the Online Safety Act was a mistake?
Yes, I do. Well, I thought so at the time, actually. I was trying from within government to water it down. It's very difficult. One of the pressures of government is that you're always being told that you've got to protect a group of people, in this case, children. And it's quite hard to argue against that. But actually, you should say the responsibility to protect children is for their parents, not for the state.
Would you, if you were to become a MP in 2029, would you support a walkback of all these policies that have introduced authoritarian control?
Well, I think the latest proposal for under 16-year-olds not to have access to YouTube are silly. I think the idea that YouTube should have to promote the BBC and Channel 4 is turning the Ministry of Culture, Media and Sport into the Ministry of Propaganda. I simply think these things are improper in a free society. So yes, of course, I'd like to see them rolled back. If you look at how it was done when votes were reduced to 18 from 21, the government held a royal commission. It looked at 19 or 20 or 21. It looked at where people came to adulthood and concluded that 18 was where people did come to adulthood because they could do other things like fight for their country and buy a drink. I think you need to work out not votes in isolation, but what is adulthood. And if you can't get married at 16, if you can't fight for the king at 16, if you can't buy a drink or a cigarette at 16, ought you really to be voting? And I think those things need to be thought through properly. I'm afraid Labour is just being opportunistic and hoping that 16-year-olds will vote Labour. Now it turns out they'll all vote for Reform or for Zach Polanski. So I wouldn't be surprised if Labour didn't drop the whole thing.
What qualities do you think a parliamentary candidate should have in 2029?
Well, not just in 2029, but as a general rule, a parliamentary candidate should be willing to think for himself, should have clear principles, and from my point of view, should be a conservative. I want people to stand for election who believe in the principles of conservatism, not just people who want to get into the House of Commons.
How has the party changed over time? I mean, obviously you became an MP in 2010, but how involved were you before 2010?
Well, I've been a member for a very long time. I was an association chairman. I've been on ward committees. I've done most of the things that people do within the party. How has the party changed? I'm afraid it's got smaller and older. And that is a pity. We need to get bigger and younger.
How do you do that?
Oh, it's a very good question. I think you've got to look at how you structure a party in the 21st century. I'm not sure that our current structures are working, and we're trying to merge structures together, and I'm not sure that succeeds. I think you weaken some structures that way. We need to look at how you structure a mass membership party now, and you may want to do it on a parliamentary basis, as we did in the 1940s when we revitalized the party. You may need to do it on a council basis. You need local activity as well as national activity.
You were obviously a backer of Robert Jenrick in the leadership election, so was I. Were you disappointed at his defection? Do you think it was his intention, or do you think Kemi forced him into it?
Oh, I think it was his intention. I regret supporting him for the leadership, that I don't approve of sour grapes. I think if you lose a leadership election, you shouldn't go off in a sulk to another party. I thought he behaved gracelessly over it. I think it's very disappointing.
Would you ever accept a peerage?
I can't see why I'd be offered one.
Do you support any House of Lords reform?
Not particularly. Frankly, I think House of Lords reform is a waste of time. There are many more important things to do. And the difficulty with House of Lords reform is that any reform you do weakens the power of the House of Commons, and therefore MPs are not going to want it.
What's your favourite co-presenter on GB News?
Well, I don't have a co-presenter. I always present by myself. And I think GB News is a hotbed of extraordinary talent. I thoroughly enjoy presenting the Daily Tea, which I do sometimes either with Camilla Tominey, who I'm also on GB News with, or with Tim Stanley. So my co-presenting's with those two, who I think very highly of. But if you go to GB News, Nigel Farage is a great man. Martin Daubney I see every night when Nigel isn't there, who is a really professional presenter. Christopher Hapex of the Telegraph is so good. Miriam Cates, former Tory MP, now moved full-time to being a broadcaster, does it brilliantly too. So I'm very lucky to work with very able people.
Have you had a better time outside of Parliament than you did in?
I don't really look at life like that. I think that one needs to view what one's doing at the moment rather than worrying about whether what was before was better or worse.
If you returned, what would you do differently?
What would I do differently? Many things I would do the same. I think it's always very important to hold regular constituency surgeries and to be responsive to constituents. Um, I think I would broadly do what I did in the Commons last time the same again. I mean, I have a better feel for the Commons now than, of course, I did when I got in 2010. But that will have changed because you'll have had a whole generation of MPs who I won't know. So it's trying to get, if I do get back, getting back into the swing of things.
Do you have any final messages for young Conservatives?
Thank you, I think. Thank you for sticking with us. Thank you for supporting it with us. And remember that the Tory party is an amazing institution that has had an incredibly long-standing ability to regenerate itself when times are difficult and get through to better times. But this is based on Conservative principles. It's what we believe in that makes the party a success. And I think if we believe in things, we have a sense of direction, a sense of ambition, then we will do well as a party. And I'm delighted that you and your young Conservative friends are so actively involved in helping us to regenerate once more.